Good afternoon, everybody. Today I'm going to be reading to you Good Girl, Bad Blood by Holly Jackson. This is the second book of the sequel of A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. The first book is A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, second book is Good Girl, Bad Blood, and the third book is As Good as Dead. These are all by Holly Jackson. So let's start reading. I'm going to read the blurb, which is the back of the book, okay? So, someone is missing. Nobody's talking. But this time, everyone is listening. Someone is missing. Nobody's talking. But this time, everyone is listening. As you can see that they told us about but this time. So it can show that there's another book before this, but this time. Okay? So Pip Fitzamobi is not a detective anymore. Her true crime podcast about the murder case she solved last year has gone viral. Yet, Pip insists her investigating days are behind her. Or behind her means that she forgot about them. She doesn't care about them anymore. But she will have to go back on her word when someone close to her goes missing. And the police can't do anything about it. If they won't investigate, then Pip will, uncovering more of her town's dark secrets along the way. But will she find the answers before the time runs out? Okay, so that was the blurb, the back of the book. Let's start reading the front of the book. So first here we have a map, okay, of Little Kilton, after and before. You'd think you'd know what a killer sounds like, that their lies would have a different texture, some barely perceptible shift, a voice that thickens, grows sharp and uneven as the truth slips beneath the jagged edges. You'd think that, wouldn't you? Everyone thinks they'd know if it came down to it. But Pip hadn't. Such a tragedy what happened in the end. Sitting across from him, looking into his kind wrinkled eyes, her phone between them recording every sound and sniff and throat clearing huff. She'd believed all of it all. Every word. Pip traced her fingers across the mousepad, skipping the audio file back again. Such a tragedy what happened in the end. Elliot Ward's voice rang out from the speakers once more, filling her darkened bedroom, filling her head. Stop, click, repeat. It's such a tragedy what happened in the end. She listened to it maybe 100 times, maybe even 1,000, and there was nothing, no giveaway, no change as he slipped between lies and half-truths. The man she'd once looked to as an almost father. But then Pip had lied too, hadn't she? And she could tell herself she'd done it to protect the people she loved. But it wasn't the exact same reason Elliot gave. Pip ignored that voice in her head. The truth was out. Most of it. And that's the thing she clung to. She kept going. onto the other part that made her hair stand on end. "And do you think Sal killed Andy?" asked Pip's voice from the past. "He was a lovely kid, but considering the evidence, I don't see how he could have done it. So, as wrong as it feels, I guess I think he must have. There's no other explanation." Pip's door pushed inward with a slap. "What are you doing?" interrupted a voice from right now, one that lifted with a smirk, because he knew damn well what she was doing. "You scared me, Ravi," she said, annoyed, darting forward to pause the audio. Ravi didn't need to hear Elliot Ward's voice. "Not ever again. You're sitting here in the dark listening to that, but I'm the scary one," Ravi said, flicking on the light switch. The yellow glow, reflecting off the dark hair, swept across his forehead. He pulled that face, the one that always got her, and Pip smiled because it was impossible not to. She wheeled back from her desk. "How did you get in, anyway?" "Your parents and Josh were on their way out to a very impressive looking lemon tart." "Oh, yes," she said. "They're on neighborly welcome duties. A young couple have just moved into the Chen's house, maybe down the street. Mom did the greens, or maybe the browns. Can't remember." It was strange thinking of another family living in that house. New lives perhaps seemed to fill its old spaces. Pip's friend Zack Chen had always lived there, 4 doors down, ever since Pip had moved here aged 5. It wasn't a real goodbye. She still saw Zack at school every day, but his parents had decided they could no longer live in this town, not after all that trouble. Pip was certain they considered her a large part of all that trouble. "Dinner's 7:30, by the way," Ravi said, his voice suddenly skipping clumsily over the words. Pip looked at him. He was wearing his nicest shirt tucked in at the front, and were those new shoes? She could smell aftershave too, as he stepped towards her, but he stopped short. Didn't kiss her on the forehead, nor run a hand through her hair. Instead he went to sit on her bed, fiddling with his hands. "Meaning you're almost 2 hours early," Pip said. Yeah," he coughed. Why was he being awkward? It was Valentine's Day, their first since knowing each other, and Ravi had booked them a table at the Siren, out of town. Pip's best friend Cara convinced Ravi was going to ask Pip to be his girlfriend tonight. She said she'd put money on it. The thought made something in Pip's chest, well, spilling its heat up into her chest. But it might not be that. Valentine's Day was also Sal's birthday. Ravi's older brother would have turned 24 today, if he'd made it past 18. "How far have you got?" Ravi asked, nodding at her laptop. The audio editing software Audacity filling her screen with spiky blue lines. The whole story was there, contained within those blue lines. From the start of her project to the very end. Every lie, every secret, even some of her own. "It's done," Pip said, dropping her eyes to the new USB microphone plugged into her computer. "I finished 6 episodes. I had to use a noise reduction effect on some of the phone interviews for quality, but it's done. Adding a green plastic file beside the microphone were the release forms she sent out to everyone, signed and returned, granting her permission to publish their interviews in a podcast. Even Elliot Ward had signed one from his prison cell. Two people had refused. Stanley Forbes from the town newspaper and, of course, Max Hastings. But Pip didn't need their voices to tell the story. She'd filled she'd filled in the gaps with her production log entries, now recorded as monologues. "You've finished already?" Ravi said, though he couldn't really be surprised. He knew her, maybe better than anyone else. It had been just a couple of weeks since she'd stood up in the school hall and told everyone what really happened, but the media still weren't telling the story right. Even now they clung to their own angles because they were cleaner, neater. Yet the Andy Bell case had been anything but neat. "If you want something done right, you have to do it yourself," Pip said, her gaze climbing the spiking audio clips. Right then, she couldn't decide whether this felt like something beginning or something ending. I'm sorry, but she knew which she wanted it to be. "So, what's next?" asked Ravi. "I export the episode files, upload them to SoundCloud on schedule once a week, and then copy the RSS feed to podcast directories like iTunes and Stitcher. But I'm not quite finished," she said. "I need to record the intro over this theme song I found on Audio Jungle. But to record an intro, you need a title." "Ah," Ravi said, sketching back. "We're still titleless, are we, Lady Fitzanobi?" "We are," she said. "I've narrowed it down to 3 options." "Hit me," he said. "No, you'll be mean about them." "No, I won't," he said earnestly, with the smilest of smiles. "Okay." She looked down at her notes. "Option A is an examination into a miscarriage of justice." "Well, Ravi, I can see you laughing." That was a yawn, I swear. "Well, you won't like option B either, because that's a study into a closed case. The Andy Bell." "Ravi, stop." "Well, I'm sorry, I can't help it," he said, laughing until his eyes lined with tears. "It's just all your many qualities, Pip, there's one thing you lack." "Lack?" She spun her chair to face him. "I lack something." "Yes," he said, meeting her attempt at stony eyes. "Pizzazz. You're almost entirely pizzazzless, Pip." "I am not pizzazzless." "You need to draw people in, intrigue them, have a word like kill or dead in there. But that's sensation. And that's exactly what you want, for people to actually listen," he said. But all, all of my options are accurate and boring." Pip threw a yellow highlighter at him. "You need something that rhymes, or alliteration. Something with pizzazz," she said in her Ravi voice. "You think of one then." "Crime Time," he said. "No." "Oh, Little Kilton. Maybe Little Killtown." "You know," said Pip. "You're right." Ravi got up, started to pace. "Your unique selling point is Really you? A 17-year-old to solve a case the police had long considered closed. And what are you? He looked at her, squinting his eyes. Lacking clearly, she said with mock irritation. A student, Ravi thought aloud. A girl. Project. Oh, how about Project Murder and Me? Nah. Okay. He chewed his lip, and it made Pip's stomach tighten. So something murder, or kill, or dead. And you are Pip, who's a student, and a girl who's good at. Oh my god, he said suddenly, eyes widening. I've got it. What? I've literally got it, he said, far too pleased with himself. What is it? A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. No, Pip shook her head. That's bad. Way too try hard. What are you talking about? It's perfect. Good girl, she said, dubiously. I turn 18 in 2 weeks. I won't contribute to my own infantilization. A good girl's guide to murder, Ravi said in his deep movie trailer voice, pulling Pip up from her chair and spinning her towards him. No, she said. Yes, he retorted, placing one hand on her waist, his warm fingers dancing up her ribs. Absolutely not. A, a Good Girl's Guide to Murder review. The latest true crime podcast, Obsession, ends with a chilling finale. UK Newsday. If you haven't yet listened to episode 6 of Good Girl's Guide to Murder, look away now. Serious spoilers below. Of course, many of us knew how this mystery ended from when it exploded onto the news cycles last November. But a whole doesn't wasn't the whole story here. The real story of A Good Girl's Guide to Murder has been the journey from a 17-year-old sleuth's hunch about a closed case, the murder of teenager Andy Bell, allegedly by her boyfriend Sal Singh, to the spiraling web of dark secrets she uncovers in her small town. The ever-shifting suspects, the lies and the twists. The final episode wasn't certainly isn't lacking in twists as it brings us the truth, starting with Pip's shocking revelation that Elliot Ward, her best friend's father, wrote the threatening note Pip received during her investigation. Irrefutable proof of his involvement, and truly a loss of innocence moment for Pip. She and Ravi Singh, Sal's younger brother and co-detective on this case, believed that Andy Bell might still be alive and Elliot had been keeping her the whole time. Pip confronted Elliot Ward alone and recounting Ward's words, the whole story unravels an illicit relationship between student and teacher, allegedly initiated by Andy. If true, the Pip theorized. Yes. Sorry, that yes was because my mom was calling me. If true, Pip theorizes, I think Andy wanted an escape from Little Kilton, particularly from her father, who allegedly, according to a source, was controlling and emotionally abusive. Perhaps Andy believed Mr. Ward could get her a place at Oxford, like Sal, so she could get far away from home. The night of her disappearance, Andy went to Elliot Ward's house. An argument ensued, Andy tripped, hitting her head against his desk, but as Ward rushed to get a first aid kit, Andy disappeared into the night. In the following days, as Andy was officially declared missing, Elliot Ward panicked, believing Andy must have died from her head injury. And when police eventually found her body, there might, ha- there might be evidence that would lead back to him. His only chance was to give them a more convincing suspect, he told me. He cried as he told me, Pip says, how he killed Sal Singh. Ward made it look like suicide and planted evidence so police would think that Sal killed his girlfriend and then himself. But months later, Ward was shocked to see Andy walking on the side of the road, thin and disheveled. She hadn't died after all. Ward couldn't allow her to return to Little Kilton, and that's how she ended up his prisoner for 5 years. However, in a twist truly stranger than fiction, the person in Ward's loft wasn't Andy Bell. She looked so much like her, Pip claims. She even told me that she was Andy, but she was actually Isla Jordan, a vulnerable young woman with an electoral disability. All this time, Elliot had convinced himself and Isla that she was Andy Bell. This left our final question of what happened to the real Andy Bell. Our young detective beat the police to that too. Twas Becca Bell's. Twas Becca Bell, Andy's little sister. Pip worked out that Becca had been sexually assaulted at a house party nicknamed Calamity Parties, and that Andy had sold drugs at these parties, including Rohypnol, which Becca suspected played a part in her assault. When Andy was out that night with Ward, Becca allegedly found proof in her sister's room that Max Hastings had bought wine from Andy from Andy and was likely Becca's attacker. Max will soon face trial for several rape and sexual assault charges. But when Andy returned, she didn't react in the way Becca hoped. Andy forbade her little sister from going to the police because it would get her in trouble. They started arguing, pushing until Andy ended up on the floor, unconscious and vomiting. Andy's post-mortem, completed last November when her body was finally recovered, showed that Andy's brain swelling from a head trauma was not fatal, though it no doubt caused Andy's loss of consciousness and vomiting. Andy Bell died from asphyxiation, choking on her own vomit. Becca froze, allegedly watching Andy die, too shocked, too angry to save her sister's life, hiding her body because she was scared no one would believe it was an accident. And there was our ending. No angles, no filters, just the sad truth of how Andy Bell died, how Sal was murdered and set up as her killer, and everyone believed it. In Pip's scathing conclusion, she picks out everyone and finds her at fault for the deaths of these two teenagers, naming and blaming Elliot Ward, Max Hastings, Jason Bell, Andy's father, Becca Bell, Howard Bowers, Andy's drug dealer, and Andy Bell herself. A Good Girl's Guide to Murder stormed to the top of the iTunes chart with its first episode 6 weeks ago, and it looks set to stay here for some time. With the final episode released last night, listeners are already clamoring for a season 2 of the hit podcast. But in a statement posted to her website, Pip said, I'm afraid my detective days are are over, and there will not be a second season of AGGGTM, which means A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. This case was almost consumed me. I could see that only once I was on out the other side, it became an unhealthy obsession, putting me and those around me in considerable danger. But I will finish the story, recording updates on the trials and verdicts of those involved. I promise I will be here until the very last word. Then over here we have 1 month later. I really hope that you liked the book A Good Girl, Bad Blood by Holly Jackson. Make sure to stay stuck for 1 month later. Then we'll start by the chapters. Thank you. Bye. Make sure to subscribe and like this video if you liked it.